Hi, my name is Luke Bobnar, and I'm a watershed scientist with the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, working out of the Allegheny Regional Office in Ridgeway, Pennsylvania. I cover the Clarion and the Allegheny rivers, from their headwaters down to about where they meet. I work on water quality and fish habitat improvement projects, and one of those projects I'd like to talk to you about today. It's large woody materials restoration on the Allegheny National Forest. For those that are unfamiliar with the forest, it's located in northwestern Pennsylvania and is comprised of a little over a half million acres. It was created in 1923 with the joint goals of providing a sustained yield of forest products as well as watershed protection. Two facets of the watershed protection goal are flood protection and providing a source of clean drinking water to downstream communities. And speaking of communities, the Conservancy is proud to be a partner of the Allegheny Winds Coalition. The Winds Coalition is an amalgamation of federal, state, local, and tribal government agencies, nonprofit organizations like the Conservancy, Trout Unlimited, and local watershed associations, as well as various other community groups. The Winds Coalition meets twice a year to discuss and share projects, successes, lessons learned, and other resources that advance the water quality goals for the forest and surrounding areas. The support of the forest and the Winds partners is critical to the success and efficiency of projects in this region. And the region as a whole was once like much of the state, covered in a vast old-growth forest with scattered openings that led to the moniker Pennsylvania, or Penn's Woods. It's said that at that time a squirrel could go from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia without ever touching the ground. As the artist's rendering on the screen depicts, these old-growth forests were composed of a number of tree species, sizes, different age classes, and when they fell, it had a huge impact on our aquatic and riparian ecosystems. Over thousands of years, our native animal species evolved to those conditions. But progress came, as it always does, and a growing nation needed the plethora of products available in those woods. And in the days before roads and railroads, the most efficient and economical way to get goods to market was via the state's waterways. In the 1850s, an act of the state legislature declared all PA rivers as public highways and authorized numerous companies around the state to clean, clear, and make those highways safe for industrial transport of goods. This photo, taken downstream of Arroyo on the Clarion rivers in the 1880s, shows some of those goods. Timber rafts roughly 30 feet wide and up to 170 feet long. In order to get those rafts downstream, boulders and log jams were dynamited and drug out of the channel, and while it was a great boon to commercial transport, it had serious implications for aquatic ecosystems. And those actions of bygone days have left us with a twofold legacy, one part ecological and one part cultural. Looking at this stream, it's representative of the condition of many waterways in the state. It's shallow, wide, and flat. The photo may be very aesthetically pleasing to some, but in the eyes of a fish or an angler, there's not really a lot of habitat there to spend time in. Expanding our view out into the riparian zone, you can tell that the forest is relatively young. When one of those trees eventually do fall, there's no structure in the stream to reduce the high force of flood flows, so that when one of those trees falls, they're often flushed downstream towards infrastructure and wind up reinforcing the negative perception of wood-in streams. And it continues that cultural legacy that wood-in streams is bad and we need to clean them out. But in the A&F and other remote areas with no infrastructure or private property around, wood is really a good thing for streams. Looking at this photo, there's a lot going on here. One of the major ways that wood is beneficial to streams is that it provides cover for fish, macroinvertebrates that are hiding from predators. It also helps retain the leaf pack that forms the base of the aquatic food web and helps support the macroinvertebrates, which in turn feed the fish. Wood in the streams also slows down water, creating backwater pools on the upstream side and often scouring pools out on the downstream side. At the tail end of those scour pools, gravels are deposited that provide ideal spawning habitat for our native brook trout. And then those eggs hatch and mature, and the young of the year seek out side channels that the wood has helped create or reconnect so that they may find refuge from predators residing in the main stem of the stream. Also, by jamming up our streams, it helps disperse that water onto the floodplain. In the remote places where these techniques are employed, that's really a good thing. The water is slowed down on the floodplain, protecting downstream communities from flooding events becoming more severe. And the water also soaks into the soil in the floodplain, eventually making its way into the groundwater table, where it's discharged back into the stream as cool base flows. And thinking about trees in general, from the fine roots to the large roots, the stem, large branches, and fine branches, there's quite a variety of physical structure present in them that provides a diversity of habitats for aquatic and terrestrial species alike. So we know where we've come from, what happened to alter the environment, and why returning to a more natural condition is beneficial. And we'd like to see our streams get a little bit woodier. Estimates from scientific studies and the remaining old growth in the areas say that there were approximately 300 to 400 large trees per stream mile. And thinking about how we return to those levels, we often have to consider stream size and the budget we have to work with. The cheapest and easiest way we do this is occurring every day as just natural tree mortality. From ephemeral channels on down to the larger river systems, trees are being added to the streams through their own deaths, as well as lateral bank erosion. Now, this may be the easiest method, but it'll take many decades, if not centuries, to return to historic wood levels in our streams. When we think about wanting to take a more active role in that restoration, we can start with those small ephemeral streams with simple hand tools like axes and loppers, and maybe just brush them in. We found that we're most efficient working with chainsaws to directionally fell trees into the stream. Not exactly taking them from immediately adjacent to the streams, where we'd be reducing the canopy that provides shade and cover for it, but felling them from further back in the uplands so that they make contact with the stream and are influencing flow. As we move into larger streams in that 20 to 40 foot bankfull width category, we're often using our manually powered winch called a grip hoist that allows us to access remote areas while still maneuvering those trees around. And over about 40 feet in bankfull width, we start to need to use heavy equipment to entrench and ballast the trees and the structures that we put in to make them stable and secure. And then moving farther down the watershed into larger and larger systems, we consult with engineering firms and other professionals to ensure the appropriate degree of safety and stability for our structures. So I mentioned bankfull width there a number of times. Bankfull width is the width at which a stream begins to spill over onto its floodplain during high water events. It's also the point at which a stream is most forceful. We use this estimate through a number of on-site identifying characteristics like where the scour is, maybe where some flood deposition is, and it helps us determine the stream size we're able to work in. By putting in logs and trees that are twice the bankfull width, we ensure that even if they would be mobilized, they would catch on the next downstream meander bend. So that's why we limit ourselves to about 40 feet of bankfull width for the manually installed projects, because it would take an 80-foot long tree of sufficient diameter and structural stability over its entire length to remain stable in that system. Just a conceptual drawing here of what that can look like. This tree's either been directionally felled or winched into position with our manual grip hoist, and with the flow coming from the left-hand side of the screen, the tree's butt is wedged and pinned between the two existing trees on the bank, and that tree's going to stay there and be stable and in place for years. We also put slash and brush on the upstream side of the tree to help retain the fall leaf pack and degrade sediment, and the hydraulic head that develops because of that elevation drop helps to scour out the pool on the downstream side. Looking at a structure like this in the field, this log has been placed between two existing trees with brush piled on the upstream side. And here's that same tree several years later. It's collected several feet of mobile woody debris and sediment and has developed the intended scour pool on the downstream side. Many times we'll often place and lace a number of logs and trees in between existing ones to have a stable structural configuration in the stream, with our anticipated pools developing up and down. And then as we move into larger stream and river systems, we need to design a little bit more stable structure that'll be installed with heavy equipment, entrenched into the banks and help protect infrastructure and remain stable. So over the past 8 years, we've completed almost 9 stream miles using large wood restoration and installing. With that technique, we've installed more than 1,000 logs and 354 structures, and we estimate that this has improved a minimum of nearly 27 acres of riparian habitat. So let's take a walk along a few of those stream miles. This is Salmon Creek near Marionville in Forest County. You can see the stream shallow, flat, and lacking structure. Those characteristics can also help turn it into a bit of a sluice pipe or almost a fire hose during high water events, likely washing out any small trees and limbs that do fall. So we felled trees from the adjacent uplands, and in their first winter, they're already collecting mobile woody materials and degrading sediments. And then several years later, nature's engineer, the beaver, came in and built a dam on our structure. As I alluded to before, we added additional trees to this channel. Before we added additional trees to this channel, smaller woody debris like the small limbs that beavers use to build their dams may have been fairly easily washed out of the channel. But by providing a good stable foundation, our work was able to ensure the safety and stability of what turned out to be an approximately 5-foot tall beaver dam. Beavers are a natural and historic force on the landscape, and since floodplain reconnection is one of the goals of our work, we're happy to work with our wild partners here. Moving now over to McKean County, this is a grip hoist project on Mead Run that certainly provided us a hard-learned lesson. You can see in the photo that we've been brushing the stream in on our structure's footprint, and the hemlock that's leaning out over the stream will form one of the anchor trees on a pin for the structure. So we felled a maple tree from the adjacent upland and winched it into position, utilizing the bank hemlock on the previous slide and the 2 hemlock stumps here. We felled those hemlocks to add ballast weight to the structure, as well as encourage the stream to access a relic side channel on the opposite bank. Now, several hundred feet away from this structure is a dispersed use camping site, and we've learned over the years that outreach and signage is extremely important for these projects. Unfortunately, this structure was not recognized as a fish habitat structure, and before we could get out there to put any signs on it, a portion of some of the logs were taken and used as firewood. So we developed these signs that we were tactfully placing out along some of our projects, and we're trying to strike the delicate balance between appropriately signing projects in sensitive areas and avoiding too much sign pollution across the forest. Another project we recently worked on was along Bucklick Run in McKean County. This project utilized heavy equipment and combined several water quality best management practices, or BMPs. The Forest Service was planning to decommission the road on the left side of the screen. We thought, with having the equipment there, why not do some work in the stream to help create pool habitat and encourage the stream to access the opposite bank's floodplain more often. So we constructed a series of log jams that serve as grade controls to do this. And one of the structures towards the top of that reach was designed to force the stream to move away from that recently disturbed bank and give it time to revegetate. These are the bones of that structure. They're large, stable, key pieces that really move the water and help protect the bank. We also place slash and treetops in that structure to help retain leaf pack, grade the sediment, and further orient the thoweg towards the left descending bank. Several months later, it's doing just that. You can see the thowegs moved over, away from the recently disturbed soil, and the beginnings of a sediment bar are forming in the left foreground of the photo. We've been monitoring these projects over the years, working primarily with the Forest Service on their channel unit surveys, and those describe the different habitat types present in the stream, like riffles, runs, and pools. We're also monitoring fish populations and working on a watershed scale study with a number of other partners to examine many different parameters, all correlated with large woody material restoration. The Conservancy's part in that is going to be studying the redds, so the nests that trout make and to deposit their eggs into, and looking at canopy cover associated with those redds. Piece mobility, where we'll be tagging a percentage of the logs we install and see if, how, and when they move. And we'll also be taking a look at wetlands on the floodplain. I'd like to thank all of our partners and volunteers who've made this work possible over the years. Without them, we wouldn't really be able to do this work. I'd also like to thank our funders. Without their generous financial support, these projects would not be the successes that they are. And lastly, thank you for attending today. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation on large wood restoration projects on the Allegheny National Forest. If you have any questions about the project or would like to learn more, please feel free to reach out via email or over the phone. Thanks again and have a great day.